Welcome back to Looking for Work. If you got a question, drop it in the comments and I will take my best shot at answering it. We had a few questions last time, so I'll try and answer those first. Top of the hour. Apologize for that. It takes a little bit if you put a comment in there, it takes like 30 seconds or so for me to see it. So one thing I would definitely recommend is if you are joining us, this is your first time, we do this every week. It works really great if you throw your comments in the box early and often. So while I'm answering questions, if you can drop your questions in there, that way I won't miss anything towards the end. If the questions start to slow down, then we usually kind of end once I start seeing there's no more questions, because then it's just me staring at myself, not doing much, not saying much. So, but I'm more than happy to hang out here for as long as we got folks asking questions. I just don't have additional content that I usually cover other than answering questions. We do Ask Me Everything every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific. And this is a great opportunity for you to get your questions answered. Also, at the very top, I will mention the applications are now open. So for folks that are looking for an apprenticeship, we haven't done a big announcement yet, but we literally opened up the portal on Friday. And I'm going to send out an email blast to everybody to let them know. And then we'll start reviewing applications probably later this week. We'll start kind of going through, and then it'll be a regular basis that will be basically screening folks and letting folks know on an ongoing basis who's eligible and what the steps are. So if you're interested in an apprenticeship, check out cccareers.org/apply, and you can apply online. Applications are now being accepted. Hey, Smita, good to see you. So what questions do you folks have? I can bring up from the last time the questions that I did not get to. There were three of them. I think there are three. I can't remember if I covered. Maybe I might have gotten one of them, but I'll cover it anyway. So the first question that I saw might have been missed, which is, what are some of the more notable movements in the space that I think are worth paying attention to? And so from an early career or hiring perspective, people looking to transition into the space, let me think, what are some trends? Well, one trend is not a good trend, and that is folks are tending to in an effort to screen out students that are graduating from coding boot camps, because there's a big volume right now of early career developers that most companies are just not interested in having conversations with. They're making an effort now to sort of like ratchet up the minimum number of years. So it used to be like they'd say 1 or 2 years of experience. And then they realized that like a lot of people were applying that had less experience than that. So now they're usually starting with like 3 to 5 years of experience. So you'll see a lot of entry-level roles, and they're basically saying, they want someone early career, but they want someone that has at least 3 to 5 or 1 year. And so that's a trend I'm seeing kind of across the board. However, it's still a wish list for you early career folks, for graduates of programs. There's still tons of opportunity, and it doesn't mean that you can't apply for the role. And if they can't find someone with 3 years, they'll look for someone with 2. If they can't find someone with 2, they'll look for someone with 1. If they can't find 1, they'll hire someone with less experience. So still, make sure that you're going out and getting after those positions. If you feel like you've got all the skills required to do the job, that's the key, is like kind of figuring out, is that where you should be? A couple other movements in the space, things that are, I guess, different than what it used to be. I think a lot of folks are more flexible to remote work. So I think a lot of folks, not just because of or under the conditions of the pandemic, but outside of the pandemic, I think they're more open to hiring outside of their current geographic region. But that said, it may still be tough for you to get a job. It may be okay for you to get like a remote job, but in your region versus like out of state. And so the out of state part, for most folks that are applying, you might not think about from the employer's perspective, but from the employer's perspective, you have to understand the labor laws in each state. And so if you're an employer thinking about hiring people outside the state could be more complex from just an HR standpoint. So one thing to consider, it may be easier for you to find remote positions in your state versus like across state lines. As soon as you cross state lines, you got to be a little bit more of a sophisticated organization to be able to pull that off. So, how many projects do you need before finding a job? So that was one of the leftover ones from last week. I don't know. So when I'm looking at, from a hiring manager's perspective, when I'm looking at portfolios of folks, I'd like there to be at least a couple. So at least 2 projects on a portfolio. That's actually, frankly, enough. As long as on those 2 projects, everything looks decent. I'm probably not going to like look at much more than that. If someone had 5 or 6 projects, I would still probably only randomly pick one and then randomly pick another one. And that would probably be enough for me to say, okay, I've seen enough. This is good for me to make a decision. It's worth pursuing and having a conversation, or I'm not going to look at any more projects. These 2 are not where I'm not interested. Right. So I think 2 would be enough. I think 1, it would be, be like, all right, cool, you got 1 project, but I probably want to see, bigger sample, greater sample size than 1. So that's my perspective. And I think the reasoning there is I don't have a lot of time to spend a ton of time looking through the code. I'm more interested in just kind of seeing with an early career developer, where's their fundamental skill set at? Okay, great. Now I know where their skill is. Now I can move on to the next phase, which is like, do they have the essential worker skills, the 21st century skills for them to be successful? And if so, then we can move on to the next phase, right? So, awesome. Another question, and feel free, if you have any questions, drop them. I haven't seen any questions come through, so please don't wait until the very end, because once we go through these questions, if there's no other questions, that's it. I'm going to go eat lunch. So, but I'll stay here and answer questions if you have them. So please feel free to drop a question. The way you get questions to me is you can shoot me an email. So mike@cccareers.org, or you can go into the comment boxes on either Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. If you drop it in the comments, it comes to me as a question. It takes about 30 seconds to a minute though. So you got to put it in right now while I'm talking. That way, by the time I finish answering your question is in there and you're good to get that answered. So, in terms of leftover questions from last week, there's one other question, and that is, what are warning signs of a bad company culture? Is there any way from telling from outside perspective? Sure. So I would say a great resource is Glassdoor. So a lot of folks will go on to Glassdoor and will leave reviews for their employers and managers. So I would suggest that you take a look there, see if you can find the organization and do some research there. You can also reach out to employees on LinkedIn, right? Reach out and ask them, what's their experience been? What is it like working inside the company? You can talk to people that are former employees. And I think it's a lot easier these days than it used to be. Before, there weren't all these social media channels, right? And it wasn't easy for you to figure that out. So yeah, from an outsider's perspective, it's make contact, connect with people inside the organization. And that should be able to help you kind of, figure that piece out with real anecdotal evidence. You can also ask. So one of the interesting interview questions that I like to ask during an interview is, do you like working here? Right? And if you can tell that they're kind of like faking it in their response, they're like, oh yeah, this is a great company to work for. It's like, all right. But they might tell you like, no, stay out of here, man. Like, this is no good. No bueno. That'd be a good person to listen to, right? If they're telling you straight up, like, this is a tough shop, it might be a good sign that like, this is not the right fit for you as an early career developer. You want a place where you're going to get a lot of support and you're going to be able to thrive as a candidate. So I would get that first person experience. And I always take, people's opinion with a grain of salt, right? Someone might have beef with somebody, or they might have, for whatever reason, decided that like, hey, listen, this, I'm going to burn somebody because they fired me, right? So always, try and take it with a grain of salt. So hopefully that helps. So Kaya asks, it's kind of long, but when interviewing for your first job, is it appropriate not to be transparent about you're not confident in? For example, if it asks for multiple languages, but you don't know how to code, do you let them know that would be the best way to communicate it? So I think the most important tip I can give you in terms of like the interviewing best practices would be to try and be positive, to try and frame things in a positive way. So even though you might be feeling like you're not confident about a particular skill, rather than talking about like your lack of confidence, talk about what you're confident in. Talk about like, hey, I feel really solid in JavaScript, right? Or I feel like I'm really good at solving, front end UI with HTML and CSS. I feel really comfortable in that space. And so yeah, your question makes sense in terms of like, how do you deal with that confidence issue when you're interviewing, but focus on the positive, right? Rather than focusing on the gap, like I don't know 2 or 3 languages, focus on, I know this one really well. And I think I could pick up this language that you use or the languages that you need in a fairly short period of time. And so that's the best way to discuss it, is in a positive and constructive way, because I want to know as an employer that you can handle any kind of difficulty and challenges in a positive and constructive way. And it doesn't matter to me that you might not have them. If they need to know, like if you have that skill set, they'll ask. They'll say, like, how comfortable are you with this language? How comfortable are you with that language? So again, you want to say it in a positive way, and you want to get comfortable and get more confident in what you do know. And if you're not confident, you got to be able to fake that confidence and be, you don't want to mislead anybody about your experience, but you want to be confident in what you do bring to the table, which I think is doable. So hopefully that helps. Bill, that's a great question. What do you think about professional certifications? Which ones are valuable? The ones that are valuable are the ones that an employer says are like a must-have in a particular domain, is usually where this comes into play. So I'll give you an example. For a lot of like cloud architects, they might want you to be certified on that particular service provider's platform, like Azure or AWS or Google Compute Cloud. So they'll want to know that you've got some of those certifications if you're going to be doing that type of work. Now, that said, it's not going to just be the certificate for you to need to have to transition into the career. You're also going to need to have some actual skill and be able to say, not only did I pass the test, but I can actually, create solutions. And I understand the infrastructure and the ecosystem. So the ones that are the most valuable are the ones, first of all, that are like kind of required for those positions. So as I said, cloud architecture, that's a required. They're probably not going to hire you without the certification. On the other hand, for many of the other like software engineering, there's not really an industry standard test. So although there are vendors that have tests, they're not really industry recognized for like software engineering. So those I don't think are as valuable. Similarly, if you're getting into like cybersecurity, there are a few that might be valuable, like a Security Plus, but they're also going to be a situation where it's like, okay, let's say it's A+, like if you're doing desktop support, that's gonna an industry standard, and they're gonna expect that you have that. You won't be able to get a job without it, so therefore it's valuable. I try and tell people not to focus too much on if I get this certificate, will I get this job? Instead, think about the jobs that you want, and then look and see, is it a prerequisite for those types of jobs? So if I wanted to get into project management, the PMP certification is sort of an industry standard. So you need to get your PMP certification if you want to be a project manager. However, I wouldn't get that so that you could potentially get a project management job, but you might also want to do some other things. Only get it if that's the thing and it's a barrier to you getting into that field. Hopefully that makes sense, Bill, because from my perspective, it's always sort of a nice to have for some jobs and only a requirement for a subset. So, hey, Mike Hingley, it's good to see you. Yeah. I'm not sure that it's ever like a good use of your time to spend a lot of time dwelling on things that you don't feel you're good at. It's okay to be transparent. But filibuster. Spend all the time talking about the stuff you're good at, unless they specifically say, what are you not so great at? What are your areas of opportunity? Great. Give them a couple areas of opportunity. If they say, give me 3 areas, give them exactly 3. You don't need to give them 4. Don't give them 1 or 2. They say 3, give them 3. Right? So, but filibuster, take the rest of the time talking about why you're the best fit for the role, and you'll get more confident over time, I think. But that's why they call it self-confidence, because you have to have it. What other questions? That's all I had from last week. I caught up. I did all the catch up for last week. So I like Kaya's got a couple. Bill, anybody else have any questions? And I'll hang out here for like a minute after I say that. But if no other questions come through, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can kind of cover. I think I mentioned before, but I'm excited about it. The apprenticeships applications are open. So if you know somebody, send them to the website. Tell them to fill it out. We had one come through while we're on here, so I think I know who that was. I think I know who it was. Any other questions? You are welcome, Bill. Otherwise, my guess is everybody's got jobs. That's good. I like hearing that. No questions means everybody's working or training. There's a lot of people I know that are going through. The pandemic's been a great time to reskill and get some training under your belt so you're ready for some of these roles. So, all right, John asked a question. How can I get past not working for more than 6 months and be able to get my resume in front of hiring managers? It's good. So gaps are inevitable. I think everybody knows that, there's going to be a point where if your employment ends one place, you're not 100% in control of how long the process is going to take. So the first thing I usually focus on is don't make it a blocker to you just making positive steps forward, right? So don't be so self-conscious about it that you're like, oh man, I'm done. Because then it's just it gets worse because then the period takes longer. So you definitely want to be efficient about your time now. Now that there's already a gap, it should be all the more pressure for you. I guess pressure is not the best word to describe it because you're probably already feeling stressed out, but it should give you all the more reason to be really efficient at your search now. There's nothing you can do to change the fact that there's already been 6 months. And so now it's really about making your process efficient so you can shorten the time frame, right? So number one, stop any of the things that are inefficient. You need to get your spreadsheet, do your 10 reach outs per week, do your follow-ups with those individuals, connect with people inside the organization, do all the kinds of things that I talk about on a regular basis, track them so you know when you need to follow up with folks. And then from that point, start really working on your portfolio, your passion projects. So that way, when people say, okay, I can see that you've been out of work for a little while, that's cool. What have you done in the last 6 months? Because that's the first question I'll ask someone when they say, I've been out of work, been looking for work okay, cool. What have you been doing? That's where you want to be able to start talking about. You've used this time while you're looking to work on passion projects, learn a new skill, increase your knowledge of a library. That way you can kind of show that it hasn't just been idle time. You've made good use of it. But you want to have an answer to that. You don't want to be in a situation where you basically say, when someone says, what have you been working on? I've been looking for a job. Not a good answer. So the best thing you can do is have an answer for that question. That's how you get past the hiring managers and their thought process, which is oh, this guy's been out of work for a while. So I don't know. Update your resume, throw some passion projects on there and show that hey, you've been keeping busy and you've got all the skills that are necessary. So hopefully that helps, because I know that you start to kind of feel like you're bailing water and it's getting harder and harder. But at the end of the day, make the process as efficient as possible so that you can kind of stop the bleeding and get a better ratio of phone screenings, and then phone screenings to interviews, and then interview to a conversion. Now, when you say getting your resume in front of hiring managers, the second part to that is that it shouldn't just be submitting your application online. It should be you finding someone inside of the organization, making sure that you have somebody internally that's like your internal champion that you know, and that could say, oh, you've applied, awesome. Let me see if HR could schedule a phone interview with you. But if you know no one and you're just relying on the HR folks to sort of move you through the pipeline and the funnel, you're in trouble. You cannot just rely on the HR people. That's the reality of the situation. So for those folks that are applying, you're putting your application in, you're talking to an HR person, you need to get some other friends. You need to recruit some other team members internally. This is tried and true. I can't tell you the number of times that I've told someone, start talking to folks on the engineering team that you're trying to get onto, right? Go to the meetups and meet the engineering manager, right? And 9 times out of 10, you meet the manager, they'll at least get you to the point where you can get a phone screening, right? And so if you're having trouble getting the resume in front of the hiring managers, then I think you're missing my point. You need to be trying to get your resume in front of the engineering managers, the hiring managers on the engineering team, and make sure that you're not just getting your resume to HR. Data science course. Yeah. So depending on the types of roles you're applying for, it may be, I'm not sure what your background is for data science. Data science is kind of hard to break into, but if you've got previous experience, you can leverage that to work inside of the industry, and they might have they could have another need that requires those skills, but it might not necessarily be data science. If that makes sense. What kind of roles are you applying for? Relocate to California network. Yeah, you build it one person at a time. So I'd say, start reaching out to folks on LinkedIn. Start connecting with people at meetups. There's a lot of virtual meetups right now. So it might be fairly convenient right now that you could hit 1 or 2 meetups per week and start, connecting with people inside of that meetup group. They're free. Just go to meetup.com. Check in your city. There's a bunch of usually special interest groups. Start networking there. Yeah, data mining, service management. Okay. Yeah, then you got a little bit of experience, domain-specific experience. I think that's going to be super helpful. What else? What other questions do you have? I'm not seeing any other questions come through, so we're going to probably end this early. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so we are going to end it here in 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come through, so the best place for folks that are seeing this and it's on the replay and it's not live, check out the YouTube. There's a ton of the previous ones. They could be super helpful resources for what this job search process looks like. And then we'll do this. We do this every week, every Tuesday, 12 o'clock noon. More than happy if you send me an email in the meantime to save up those questions and ask them during the next session, which is going to be Tuesday, 12 o'clock Pacific. All right. Take care.